Welcome to the What on Earth Are You Doing After 50 radio show, featuring your host, Gwendolyn Ware-Swimt, CEO and founder of Senior Health Matters, certified life strategist to the baby boomers, and #1 international best-selling author. Gwen is all about life after 50, arriving in tip-top health to go on to the next career. Gwen's guests will inspire you to eat healthier, live more energetically, and support you to ramp up your second half of life. And now, here's your host, Gwendolyn Ware-Swimt.
Good morning. Good morning. What on earth are you doing after 50? Thank you for tuning in. My guest today is Deborah K. Adams. Thank you, Deborah.
Well, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Deborah, gee, I don't know what to say. I just want to thank you so much for coming on and for being so gracious to fill in for Pat Lewis. We will be rescheduling her, but I want to thank you. Deborah, so tell me, what have you been up to since we last talked?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I have been working on the internet and with social media like crazy because I so enjoy that. I don't know why. I think because I can do it in my pajamas. I can do it when my 3-year-old grandchild is right there next to me, cuddling up. So it's mobile and it's quick and it's interesting and I can multitask. So what have I been doing? I have been promoting International Women's Day. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited to do that as a woman. In this society that we live in, Gwen, I think it's important that we celebrate being a woman and that we talk about it in positive ways. What do you think about that?
Oh, yes. I totally agree with that. We've come a long way. We've had a long way to come. And, And I was reading up on the International Women's Day. Didn't know too much about it, mm-hmm. But one thing that stood out for me was the improvements that have been made. For instance, women astronauts.
Yes,
great thing. We now have prime ministers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And another thing that stood out was the tone has changed from being a reminder about the negatives to a celebration of the positives. I thought that was, I just think that's wonderful. You don't hear that often.
Yeah, I think that's very appealing. You know, around the world, we've been celebrating International Women's Day since 1909. Can you believe that?
Wow.
That is a long time.
Yes, that's why I thought to go from the talking about the negatives to the celebration of the positives. Wow. Yes. Since 1909. That's
1909. And the basic purpose was to promote gender equality. Mm-hmm. And this holiday is celebrated by millions of people. Mm-hmm. And the reason it kind of is a lot of ways similar to Mother's Day here in the United States.
Yeah.
But it takes it a little bit beyond that to include the professional realm. Mm-hmm. I think that's important for.
Yeah, that's interesting that it's treated a little bit like Mother's Day. I think that's very nice. That we can get gifts.
Absolutely. We love to get gifts for just being us. That's the way it should be, right? Exactly. There are some countries in the world that actually have International Women's Day as a public holiday across the nation. Mm-hmm. And it's quite an impressive list. It's Afghanistan, Angola, Armenia, Belarus, Cuba, Laos, Moldova, Ukraine, Russia, Vietnam, and Zambia, just to name a few. I do want to say that, United States is not on that roster.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we do not celebrate it as a public holiday. But I do know that when I worked for my community-based nonprofit that was focusing on domestic violence and all forms of violence against women, that we did celebrate the day. And if people chose to, they could take it off as their, they had a personal leave day that you could pick throughout the year. And a lot of us, a lot of women would take that day off to celebrate it as International Women's Day.
Oh, I see. It's not a national holiday, but it is celebrated. Mm-hmm.
It is celebrated, yes.
Well,
and there's actually, there's 4 countries that have it as a holiday, but it is for women only. So men don't celebrate it. And I thought that was an interesting discussion.
Right.
But, China, Macedonia, Madagascar, and Nepal, it's a holiday for women only. And the men don't participate, which is interesting because I think everybody should participate, don't you?
Yes, I do. We all participate in the celebration of presidents and,
Absolutely.
Right.
So, and Women's Day has really expanded to be inclusive, and it includes women in the arts, women in work, in the trades, at home, how to celebrate all aspects of being a woman. And that's why it's so important to me. Mm-hmm. There's actually a web page, Gwen, that I go to quite a bit, and it is it's internationalwomensday.com. And when you go there, you can sign up to be on their alerts list. It also will tell you quite a bit about the history. And I'm always interested in the history of things because that helps me understand how we got to where we are today. That's why I study history and why I enjoy finding out about the origins and the beginnings of things. Because I say, okay, so we have this International Women's Day, and we've done it for 100 years, but what is it all about? What does it mean? What is the purpose? And those types of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I did go to that website last night just to familiarize myself somewhat with what we're out today.
Right. But it was really important in the beginning to establish votes for women. Because if you think about the United States history at that time, women didn't get the right to vote until 1926.
1926.
Yes. Isn't that crazy?
That was a long time from the beginning of...
Yeah, and it's a long time from now. And I think it's interesting just to tie that to current day's events and thinkings. Our politicians are actually making a concerted effort to engage women voters. And I think so that does show quite a transformation from not having a vote until 1926 to where politicians recognize that women have the right to use their voice and make that political statement for themselves. Do you remember when you first voted, Gwen?
Yes. Yes, that was, yes, I do.
I do too, and it was a really exciting moment for me because they had just adapted the law to make it so you could vote when you were 18.
Right.
Because up to that point, you had to be 21.
21, right. Yes, I do remember that.
So, and I was so excited about it because it was a long time ago. It was 1970. It was 1972, and I was raised by a working class family, and my parents were not so much politically engaged, but they had opinions, and they were voting for McGovern, who was out of South Dakota, and that's where we lived when I was a young child. So that's who I placed my vote for. I know you don't have to tell who you voted for, but I think it's interesting to think about your own women's history, you know, in those kinds of details.
Right. Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up, Deborah, and correct. Well, tomorrow is a day that is being promoted as a day to give up your using technology, your phones, your computer. I saw that somewhere. And I thought, I said, well, you know, I wonder if this was planned, because tomorrow is International Women's Day. Now, why would we want to give up our cell phones and our all of our technology on that day?
You're right. I absolutely would not want to. So I'm not sure who's arranging that action, but I know it does. I don't think it has anything to do with Women's Day. It might have to do with, well, you're right. Who knows what everybody's political agenda is behind
exactly
what their activities are about. But yeah, so March is kind of a busy month, and tomorrow is actually March 8th. But sometimes organizations will plan events around the day. You know, they don't always happen on the day. And I was going to share with you some of the events that I have learned about.
Well, we'd love to.
Yeah, because I think they're really interesting. I mean, the theme for this year is inspiring change. And it does, their logo for inspiring change does have a sort of a connection to the art world. But inspiring change happens in my life almost every day.
Yes.
It's not something I do once in a while. I'm always trying to find inspiration, and I'm always trying to create change.
You have to, if you want to keep moving forward. You're right. It is a daily thing. And on that note, Deborah, would you like to? No, go on and finish what you were going to talk about, because I want to ask you about your favorite quote. But I want to hear.
Okay. Well, one of the things that happened is they did a roundup of research, and it's actually published in a professional journal, the Journal of African Economies, and they're finding that gender does matter for economy, and so I think it's really important that they're looking for ways to encourage women to create an economy, even in Africa, where things are, they're not quite as developed as they are here in the United States. So working on economy and gender is a really important focus, I believe. And sometimes places just want to get together and celebrate. You know, they have a conference or workshop where they'll play music and just general awareness about women's health concerns and family concerns and all those. In fact, that's how I first got involved. I live in Washington State, but I'm right on the border, close to Oregon. Okay. And Portland, Oregon had an International Women's Day celebration. And so I went to it, and I was just amazed. They had vendors that, like most of the vendors were women who had created beautiful art and jewelry and just fun things, clothing. I mean, they had everything there.
I like that.
And I was so amazed and so thrilled to be in an atmosphere that was, like we said earlier in the broadcast, celebrating women. So I think that's a really fun way to mark the day as well.
It is. It should be a not too difficult thing to pull together, because women these days are very anxious to be a part of, women helping women.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
They even have, in 2013, they even created a song for celebrating International Women's Day, and it's called One Woman. And you can find that on YouTube if you want to listen to it. But it's very motivational to me, very inspiring.
Thank you. I'll do that, and I hope our listeners will find that as well.
Go to YouTube and type in International Women's Day, or onto the internationalwomensday.org website, and you can type in videos. They have a huge long list of videos relating to International Women's Day and the successes of women throughout the universe that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Deborah, tell us some of the things that you do daily to inspire change. You brought up that inspiring change is something that you feel the need to do daily, and I feel that way as well. Would you like to share some of the things that you...
I would. I'd love to do that, because I don't know... well, I think I started doing this after leaving an abusive relationship. Mm-hmm. And once I got to the point where my basic needs were met, mm-hmm. which, house, food, shelter, protection from the weather. Right. Once we got that met, I started having some energy around who was I and where was I going and, how do I define myself and all those kinds of things. And I turned towards the self-help industry because I didn't have enough income to seek professional help on a one-on-one basis. Right. So I became a researcher, if you will, and I found these lovely sites that were based on positive thinking. Mm-hmm. And so, and I found an author named Sarah Von Greynock, and she was actually a guest on the Oprah show in the 90s. And she wrote a book called Simple Abundance. Geez, I just had a senior moment lapse. Simple Abundance, and she had lined it out like it was a essay for every day of the year. So for the next year, I read one of her essays, and she had activities you could do. She gave you motivation and illustrations of what she's talking about. But for every 2 months, she had one principle that she focused on. And the most impactful principle that she started out with very early on was gratitude.
Oh, yes.
And so at that point, I remember I was in a really negative space, even though I was trying to climb out of it.
Right.
And I was in a kind of a mindset, if you will, what they call being a victim, where everybody's doing something to you. Mm-hmm. And you don't feel like you have any choices or any say in the matter. And so I started implementing her suggestions for increasing gratitude. And that meant she suggested you did it in the morning when you just wake up, mm-hmm. or at night just before you went to bed. And I chose to do it in the evening before I went to bed because at the time I was experiencing a lot of, I call it mind whirl, where mm-hmm. your brain won't shut down, your body's exhausted, yes. Your brain won't shut down.
Right, so you don't get any sleep. Yes.
Yeah, you cannot fall asleep. So I chose to practice this, what she called doing a gratitude journal, and I chose to do it right before I went to bed. Mm-hmm. And so right before I went to bed, every evening, I would write down in my gratitude journal 5 things I was grateful for. Mm-hmm. And that was amazing how quickly I was able to flip my own personal script from negativity and feeling like a victim to saying, that's not who I am, here's who I am. And I began during the day looking for positive, exciting things to write in my journal. I mean, I just had a spiral bound journal from the
Right. It could just be a notebook.
Yeah, just a plain old. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I picked the color. That's what I was able to do. It was 69 cents, I think. And a pen. I found a favorite pen that I liked the way it felt and the way it wrote. And I would, that was my gratitude journal. And so I began looking for things. And I remember like driving to work, and because we live in the Pacific Northwest, we get a lot of rain, but we don't get a lot of rainbows. So I saw a rainbow and I went, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And I'm going to write that in my journal this evening before I go to bed. So I found myself collecting those kinds of experiences. Mm-hmm. And it really helped me become aware of the world around me. Yes. And like I said, it flipped my script from negative to positive. Exactly. That's what I was going to say. It takes your mind off of the negative. It does. Focusing on what you're grateful for. And it's amazing. I mean, some days I couldn't think of anything other than I breathed. You know, today I was able to breathe all day long. Maybe that's the only good thing I could think of for that day that I could be grateful for. Because what's the alternative, right? Or sometimes it would just be, well, I'm grateful I have a roof over my head. Mm-hmm. Or it could be, I appreciate my bed because it's comfortable, it's warm, right. I feel safe there. Mm-hmm. So just those kinds of things, you know, showing gratitude for the little things makes you aware of what's going on around you. And I found that so powerful for me. So that's kind of how I started with that kind of mindset. Right. Yes, I do the same thing. I think it's very important to keep a journal because, like you said, it keeps your mind off of the negative, and it helps. It makes you want to find things that you're grateful for, and the more things that you're grateful for, the less things you have not to be, grateful for. If that makes sense. Makes sense to me. Yeah. In fact, on the What on Earth Are You Doing After 50 a group that we have, today is Gratitude Friday. So every Friday, people post what they're grateful for. Yeah. And, I think that's important. And it seems a shame that we have to keep reminding ourselves about that, right? Well, but we do. But we, that's something, there are so many negativities out there. You have to remind yourself or they'll take you over. Yeah. Negative, you have to be in control of what you had asked me earlier about, you were going to ask me about a favorite quote. Yes. Okay, I'm so glad you asked me that question. Well, because that was another tool I used to kind of change my perspective on the world. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a lot of money, right? So I didn't have a lot of time either because I was a single parent to 4 teenagers and working full time. So through the use of books and then eventually the internet, I collected quotes because I guess I'm kind of a collector type person, but I didn't have room to store anything and I didn't have money to buy anything. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I thought, what is it I can collect that's not going to overwhelm me and, cost, like salt and pepper shakers mm-hmm. or teacups or whatever. And so quotes became my collection. Okay. And I really have the most favorite quotes of all times because it related to not only me personally, but my working with survivors of domestic violence and all forms of violence. What's from Margaret Mead. Mm-hmm. And the quote is, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world." Mm-hmm. Okay. It is the only thing that ever has. Mm-hmm. And so I just group of committed heart to people. Mm-hmm. And I thought, so a group can be me plus one other person. Then we're a group.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't have to be thousands of people.
Right.
And so as I was using that as kind of a leader or a guide, if you would, I would connect with other people, most often other women, and we would talk about the things that we wanted to change in the world. And so that gave us strength just from sharing those kinds of thoughts with each other that, hey, I'm not the only one that thinks that way.
Right, right.
Someone else who has some of the same ideas I do, and that's very validating, right?
Right, it is. It is. You know you're not alone.
That's right. Very important
Crazy.
message for us to receive.
Right.
And I just thought, you know, wouldn't it have been wonderful if I could have had these kinds of practices and messages for myself as I was going through that violent relationship. But that's hindsight, and I can't change that. I can only move forward. So I thought, I have them now,
Right.
and this is going to take me in a different direction, and it's going to inspire me and motivate me and help me make change in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually like to make up quotes myself. I love doing that.
Awesome.
Yeah. So one I'd like to read my latest one.
Okay.
Yeah. Always using common sense is not the way, unless you always want to be common.
I agree with that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's one of my latest ones. I have many more, but that's one I came up with just recently. Because, you know, we're taught to use common sense, but common sense is not always the way.
It's
You
not.
know, it really isn't. But
And not everybody has common sense in the, you know, in the stereotypical belief of it.
right. I think you have to think outside of the box sometime, or as some people say, remove the box. And using common sense, you're not going to do that. You're going to stay in the box.
Oh, that's a good point, because common means more people are doing or thinking the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, using that kind of guide for oneself would be important, especially in anti-violence or women's organizing work, because so often we're told what we're thinking and saying and doing, it has no value. So you do have to learn how to think outside the box or
Right.
the parameters other people are putting upon you.
Exactly.
And so I love quotes for that reason. My second favorite quote, Gwen, is Gandhi.
Okay.
And his is, if you want, it's be the change you want in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
That's a
that
good
really
one.
spoke to me as well. And so I try to use that in my daily life, because now my children are grown and they've gifted me with 8 beautiful grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want my grandchildren to suffer but have to experience some of those negative experiences that I have. So I'm always using my time with them to talk about things that matter to me.
That's wonderful. Really. I mean,
So I'm busy creating 8 little activists.
oh. Nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Right. Yeah, it beats the alternative.
I have 5 granddaughters and 3 grandsons. And when I started doing the anti-violence work, I decided the awareness color for domestic violence was purple.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I like purple, and I look good in purple, so I'm going to start wearing it every day because I want to talk about it every day. You know, I want a reason to talk about this, and that's a pretty non-threatening way to do it. Excuse me. So what I found was all 5 of my granddaughters love the color purple.
Okay.
In fact, one time I had 2 of them with me. We went to their older brother's basketball game, and all three of us were wearing purple jumpsuits, or not jumpsuits, but sweatsuits.
Well, that's a good color. That's a royal color, as they say. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I hadn't really noticed it, but I heard somebody comment as we walked by, "Oh, that's so cute." Purple.
Well, they sound like they are certainly going to follow in Grandma's footsteps.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Not that their kids haven't created some good footsteps for them to follow into.
Yeah, but grandmas tend to have more time.
And I heard from a friend of mine who practices Native American traditions and practices, because she is, and she said that grandparents play a very special role, and that often parents, if their children are a gift to the grandparents and they need the assistance of the grandparents to teach them those really core values, because the parents are focused on the basic needs and manners and and those types of things. So so I've always enjoyed the role of grandmother, and I think it's a very important one, and it certainly is one I celebrate as a woman in the 21st century.
Yes, it's very important. In fact, one of my granddaughters lives with me, and I just enjoy that so much. In fact, I have two granddaughters, but this one she's the first, and we have just been buddies from birth.
Oh,
it's an enjoyable.
It's such a special relationship.
It is. It really
is.
And
my grandparents were older than I am at the time. When you look at it, and they had passed before I really was able to establish a good, solid relationship with them. So, really important for me to have this wonderful relationship with my grandkids.
Right. I can understand that for sure. Yes. Deborah, I have another question for you, unless you have another quote you'd like to share.
No, go ahead.
Okay. We pretty much focus a lot on being 50 plus. Okay. Yeah. Now, you don't mind telling your age, because we talked about this before the air. Okay. So you're 50 plus. Now, do you have anything you'd like to share with the audience as far as how you keep yourself going at that age? Because you're very active. And what is one of the things that you do on a daily basis, either nutritionally or mentally, or however, to keep yourself fit?
Yeah.
On a daily
I think there's several things that I do kind of innately and don't think about them very much anymore. And we talked about it in your Facebook group, Glenn, was, a health tip. And I said drinking, I think I said sleep. Sleep is really important.
You did. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And someone else posted, I think it was you who posted about making sure you have enough water intake. Mm-hmm. And those are two things that I have been really pretty consistent about good practices for myself, because I do make sure I get enough sleep, and I do drink water all day long. Mm-hmm. And I find that helps. I think it helps me keep my mind clear, and I can engage with others, and I have energy and interest to do that. Just some basic health things. And, basic health is so important. And you take it for granted when you're in your 20s and 30s. Do you agree with that?
Yes, you do. And then once we start making shifts in our bodies, that's when we start to pay attention to our diets, I think, more.
Yes. Part of my personal growth has been to learn to recognize my own intuition and honor my intuition and use it as a guide. And so that intuition includes how you feel in your body.
Right. I agree.
And so paying attention to that, if there's a part of your body that is not serving you at its best capacity, you're going to notice that. And noticing it is one thing, but to take action is the second thing. And that's to do some positive steps to find out what that is and how you can assist, healing in that area, or at least alleviating, whether it's pain or one of those things. But, I tended to put myself at the bottom of my list of to-do. And it's very easy to do when you're a parent and you're a single parent and you have 4 kids and you're working.
Right.
And it took a lot of practice for me to kind of elevate myself up to a higher priority. And it was also helpful when I saw how if I was feeling not healthy, not well, it had an impact on my family.
Right. Yes. And it's the same thing in if you're in business or trying to build a business. You've got to keep yourself in tip-top shape. It
impacts the people you're working with.
It does. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, so using that intuition and gratitude for being here on the earth after the age of 50.
Right.
It entails taking care of yourself physically, and health is a really important. And, I'm also happy to learn about non-traditional ways of taking care of my body, too. It's not always about going to the doctor and getting a pill, right?
Yes. I tell you, that is the way, that's a way to look at it, really.
Yeah. I mean, Western medicine would have us think that there's a pill for everything. And I didn't think about it too much until some laws changed as far as television commercials. And all of a sudden now we have all these medical prescription drugs doing advertisements. Have you noticed that, Gwen?
Prescription drugs? I've noticed all along. They put
an ad on TV and they describe the condition. Do you feel this? Do you feel that? Mm-hmm. And then they say, take our drug, and then they show how you're, healed and well. But at the very end of every one of those commercials is a disclaimer saying, if you have these symptoms, you need to stop taking it.
Oh, right. Yeah, the symptoms are...
And I'm like, what? Those symptoms are way worse than the feelings are,
Right. Yeah, I've seen that. I work in the healthcare industry, so you're right.
Yeah. I don't know what changed, and all of a sudden the pharmaceutical companies can now do that. They never used to do that. Mm-hmm. And I don't notice it now, and I'm thinking, wow, you're telling me I need to take this drug, but then you're telling me what could happen to me if I do.
Right. Usually it's in the bag when you get your medicines, but now, like you said, they're advertising it on TV. I'll have to pay more attention to that. But
yeah. And then also, when I would go to my doctor and get a prescription, I usually just accepted what the doctor said. I didn't question it. If the doctor said, take this pill for this amount of time and call me if it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Well, I never questioned the drugs, but as I grew older, I started saying, really? And how, really? What are the side effects? Mm-hmm. What are the long-term results? Started asking some of those questions, and, kind of surprises you. I remember I had migraine headaches, and I went to my general doctor, and he was an older guy, and he didn't really like people questioning him anyway, but so I didn't. But the prescription ran out, and I went to the pharmacy and said, can you refill this? And she goes, no, this is a controlled substance. You have to get another prescription from your doctor. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah.
So you have to learn to ask questions, and I'm good at that too, Gwen.
And you what?
I'm good at asking questions.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was reading about up on the water drinking, and you mentioned that you had a migraine, and one of the remedies was drinking more water.
Absolutely, and I didn't know that until after I started questioning my doctor's prescription and kind of doing that research. But yes, water can be, or lack of water can cause a headache. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and water is important, and it's important to flush some of that medicine that's in the body out, because it probably shouldn't sit there. I'm not a doctor, but it makes sense.
It does. It does make sense. I mean, for your system to work, you need to have water. And so, so I kind of made it my deal to I always have a glass of water close to me. Even when I leave the house, I tend to take a container of water with me, just because.
Yeah. So, and drinking it at the appropriate times is important as well. You can find that information, online. You can find it in our group, the water that we posted there.
Absolutely.
Different times the appropriate times to drink it. Okay. Any more quotes, Deborah, since you like to?
Since I like quote.
Yeah. Any
I actually have a book.
International Women's Day.
It's a huge, thick book. Well, so one of the other things that kind of ties to International Women's Day is I began searching for quotes by women. And so that was inspiring as well. And I found a lot of interesting women and learned more about them and their lives, and then use that to also help guide what I'm doing. I mean, I like to read self-help books, but books, biographies and autobiographies, and things that kind of, share what someone has done. And so, I mean, both Margaret Mead and Gandhi have a ton of quotes that they're known for. And you can search for quotes on the internet. You type in the word quote and then your subject, and then you will get a list of choices to do that. And so you can find a quote for every reason.
Yeah, that's true. You really can. Yeah. Maya Angelou is one of my favorite.
Oh, I love her wisdom.
Yes. She's
so down to earth, too. Yeah, I just love her.
Yeah.
She's very motivating. Do you have a favorite quote of hers?
Well, offhand, probably not, but
well, here's one of my favorite Maya quotes.
Okay.
It's, when you know better, you do better.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
And that was so helpful to me, because when I left that abusive relationship and was raising the kids by myself, I felt a lot of shame and guilt about, keeping them in that relationship for so long, because it was 17 years that we were in it. And, but hearing someone that you admire say something like that, when you know better, you do better. And so that kind of said to me was, what it illustrated for me personally was that I didn't know better at the time, but the minute I knew better, I left that relationship. We severed that relationship and moved on. So that's what I kind of have to tell myself almost on a daily basis when
when you know better.
Shame and guilt about something. As women, sometimes we carry a lot of the world's weight on our shoulders. So,
right.
So I can just quickly say to myself, what's that, beautiful words from Maya, Miss Maya Angelou? And it's like, when you know better, you do better. And that really has proven true for myself.
Yeah. Have you noticed, though, Deborah, that sometimes I can't remember who the person is that has the quote, because so many other people sometimes use the quote
Yes.
you get confused sometimes as to who actually said this.
Exactly. And so that's another wonderful aspect of this internet that we have at our fingertips. You can type in the words of a quote, like you could type in "when you know better, you do better" in quotations, and it should pull up a referral to the people that have said it. And so you can kind of do that research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's really important. And a lot of times a saying or quote has been around so long and so many people have used it that you do lose the original person who said it. And for me, that seems a shame.
It really.
Number one, I think all of us deserve credit for our own intellectual property.
Right.
And nobody else should be taking credit for that. Right. I mean, yes, share it, but give credit, where credit is due. Another saying that I used a lot, and especially when I was working in the nonprofit with survivors of domestic violence and sexual violence and trafficking and stalking and all those horrific things, is I used to say that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of along the same lines as what Miss Maya Angelou quote that we just shared. But and I actually, because we would say that and nobody knew where it came from. So I actually kind of went purposely on a hunt for that. And it's from a guy named Friedrich Nietzsche. Have you heard of him?
No,
I think he worked with Jung and those people, and psychologists worked with people in the psyche. So I just so now I love having the original person attached to my quotes, and that's another reason why I collect quotes.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do, is to look up the quote to see who actually.
Yes. And like I said, you can use that. You can find a quote for any topic.
Right. I
have lists of them saved on in a document on my computer. But once something really resonates with me, I tend to commit it to memory and use it as a guide for the future.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
And that makes you feel not alone too. If you don't have a lot of people that you actually can see and touch, and that you can get your own validation from, if you find someone who said something that resonates with you, and then you can kind of follow that person and learn about that person.
Yeah.
It's really, and most generally, I find that when I start doing that, looking into the person who said the quote and their life, I find a lot of connectors from their life and their work to me and what I'm doing right now. Yeah. And that is credibility and belief and support, and you can do that in a way that's very just up to you, and you can say, I find that support for myself. I think we as humans are very relationship oriented, but sometimes the relationships you have with people aren't the best.
Right, yeah. Or you're not on the same wavelength, so to speak. So
yes.
Yeah, you kind of have to go with who you resonate with.
Yeah. And that was a piece of advice that someone had given me early on when I went back to school in 1999, the same year my youngest son went to college.
Oh, right.
We both started college at the same time. But I took a women's studies course, and I was just amazed at the woman teaching the course. And so I met with her to talk about a project. And I said, someday I think I want to do what you're doing, and how did you get your start? And so she kind of became a mentor for me. And that's what she said, you find people that are doing what you want to do. And you hang out with them. You find a way to hang out with them.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not, that's true, but it's not always, it doesn't always have to be you don't always have to be interested in the same thing as long as you're positive about what you're doing.
That's right.
But, yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's something there that connects you to that person and what they're doing, and you want to learn that for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be in your line of work. And at that time, I was not thinking about where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that women's studies and gender studies would help me understand the history of violence against women, because I was seeing how prevalent that was in society. So I was very focused on that aspect. But, you know, searching out people that you admire and kind of learning about them and reaching out to them can be a very powerful way for you to get your own support and education too. And I'm really all about that, Gwen. Self-empowerment strategies is like my thing.
Right. Yeah, because if you don't seek it out, you don't hear about it as much, especially with the violence against women, because it's not talked about.
Right.
So, yeah, you have to research it for yourself.
And what I found too is if I have a question and I don't ask that question, nobody knows I need the answer. You know, how am I going to get the answer?
Exactly.
So I have to, that's why I feel almost compelled to ask questions. And sometimes I annoy people, I know, because I'm pretty persistent, but I don't do my asking of questions to annoy people. I do it to get information.
Right.
And I don't, and I also like a debate sometimes. I don't know how you feel about that, but I like to hear people that don't think the same way I do.
Right.
And then I like it when we can have that dialogue.
That's how you learn.
Yeah. Instead of shutting each other out when we discover we don't think the same.
Right.
Open things up a little bit and really have a conversation about why you believe that. And I never thought about that. And isn't that an interesting fact? And then can I share what I think and what I feel and what I've learned? You know, then you might be able to it's kind of a reciprocal deal. And it doesn't feel so self-centered. Right.
As long as it's a positive conversation.
Yeah. You know, people talk about there's subjects you don't discuss, right? Religion and politics. And particularly are some that you don't talk about. But I disagree with that. If we can't talk about religion and politics, why not? Why can't we talk about those? They are an integral part of who we are as human beings.
Right. I think people just get too emotional sometimes.
They do, and sometimes we get locked down into one way of seeing things, can't hear others.
Right.
But I try to find respectful and considerate ways to engage people.
Right. Exactly. We only have a few moments left, Deborah, but what I want to say is that I did get a chance to read your chapter and the missing piece.
Oh.
Yeah, it's very nice, the 5 A's. Go ahead.
Yeah, 5 A's to authenticity. Yeah.
To authenticity. And I really like what you have at the end, the little surveys or tests that you can take. I haven't gotten to that yet because I want to really focus in on that. I can't wait to take those.
Yeah, and those are all things I've tried and found useful.
Yeah, those are always useful. I remember the first one I did with Les Brown. He had something similar in one of his books. And I took that test, and I'm telling you, it will move you forward.
It does.
It really does.
And I think it's good to revisit this sort of thing every once in a while because we do grow and change.
Right.
So I might, go through those exercises right now, and my responses now will be different than they were 10, 15 years ago.
I agree. Yeah.
And so that for me just shows personal growth, and that's what it's all about for me.
Yes.
Yeah, well, great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I definitely believe in self-empowerment strategies and helping yourself along those ways.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Deborah, we're about out of time, and I just want to thank you so much for coming back on the show.
My pleasure.
And for being so graceful to fill in as you did at the last moment. Thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll call it at the first moment. Here it's early.
Oh, yeah. Yes, and for you to get up that early in the morning, I can't thank you enough, and I'll never forget the faith.
No problem. No problem. It's a pleasure to talk to you and share ideas with you, so I just appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Deborah. Thank you. So, that's the end of the show, and I look forward to my next guest. Cindy Nunnery will be on March 21st. So everybody have a good day, and write in your gratitude journal. Thank you.
I like it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We will see you in 2 weeks, right here, Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on What on Earth Are You Doing After 50? Thank you for joining me, and go out there and really rock your second half of life.